Welcome back to my channel, horror fans. Today we are discussing Mike Flanagan's The Midnight Club, based on the works of Christopher Pike, taking place at a hospice with a mysterious history, where 8 terminally ill youngsters meet each night at midnight to tell each other sinister stories and look for signs of the supernatural from the beyond. They are the members of the Midnight Club, and this is quite a different show for Mike Flanagan. Not because it's an adaptation of a previous work, he's done that with Haunting of Hill House and Bly Manor, but this is his first show that is not a short story, that is done in a single season. This is clearly setting up to be a long-running series, to the point where Mike Flanagan is involved in the writing of each episode, but he doesn't direct every episode. He directs the first 2 and then has gathered an excellent team of directors to carry the torch for him through the rest of the series. But the bigger difference even is the crowd that it is appealing to. This is based on a YA horror novel, and it is very much a YA show. That is not necessarily a bad thing, but it's an important observation and key information to know as you're going into this show. And I am quite a fan of this because it feels so different for Mike Flanagan. Every project Mike Flanagan brings upon himself always feels so different than his previous work, and The Midnight Club is no exception. And he takes such an interesting, unique approach with him that is quite challenging. In a horror story, you usually want a sense of unpredictability. You want to get to know characters, get to care for them, and be at the edge of your seat not knowing if they're going to survive or not. But Mike Flanagan's Midnight Club tells you from the moment it starts that the characters you're following are going to die. And it's this collection of young people who each of them have to face and deal with their own mortality given past trauma that they have faced and brought them to this place right now where they gather and sit to tell each other horror stories that feed their character arcs and the trauma that they're trying to overcome. And it actually makes things so compelling. You actually get a more profound sense of vulnerability from these characters. You feel like you get to know their true selves at a much quicker pace, despite them being so many main characters that you're trying to follow, and each of them offers a different perspective and a unique tragic past that you have to uncover and unpeel as the series unfolds. But from the moment, it never feels like there's a facade. It always feels like these characters, knowing that they're running against a clock, they just let go of any inhibitions or any masks and just show you their true selves, which makes things really interesting because this is still a horror show. This is still has a veil of mystery going for it. So because you get to know these characters very fast, there's still this sense of what's coming next, what's going to happen, what are we going to discover as they tell each other these stories and search for these supernatural signs and maybe even search for salvation for one or maybe all of them. And the entire cast does a phenomenal job because all of them in each episode have to play several different roles, from our young main cast to previous Mike Flanagan collaborators from Midnight Mass and Haunting of Hill House, and Heather Langenkamp from Nightmare on Elm Street, who plays Dr. Stanton in this, and it's so good to see her back, where every episode is a different story being told by one of the members of the Midnight Club. It not only allows these actors to stretch their acting muscles as they play several different characters within each hour of stories, but also Mike Flanagan and the rest of the writers and directors of this show, they get to tackle several different genres in each episode, a variety of tones that all feel balanced because this entire show is stories within stories within stories. You just get so much variety in each episode, from pot boiling to David Fincher-esque serial killer thrillers to 1940s fast-talking black and white detective noir films to homages to some of the greatest 70s and 80s horror movies and even a little bit of sci-fi sprinkled in. in there. You also get ghost stories, and of course, as you have a Nightmare on Elm Street cast member, you get some homages to classic Wes Craven works, which is just so cool to see. Each episode feels like a variety of stories that just allows the creative team to be exactly that, creative. But Mike Flanagan's fingerprint is all over this series despite not directing every single episode, be it from the relatable characters trying to overcome trauma in compelling ways, which we will get to in a bit, to the atmosphere generated, the production design, the lighting and cinematography is gorgeous. It never feels like it's too much. It never feels like it's taking place in this fantasy horror world. Mike Flanagan always cares to set a reality and just slightly stretch it for us to accept the presence of a possible supernatural. But I love that he never quite gives answers. He always leaves the most important answers to his stories in ambiguity, open to interpretation, which particularly in this show is really important as, again, this is the show that is clearly setting itself up for multiple seasons. Unlike Midnight Mass, Hill House, Bly Manor, this is not a show that you watch the 10 episodes and it's done. And you get everything clear and you get clear resolutions. You have everything coming full circle for all the characters. You don't. You have heartbreak, you have distinct character arcs, you have growth for each character, you get new understandings of certain elements in the show, a lot of religious symbolism that Flanagan always likes to tackle, but a lot of it is open-ended, and by the end, you get exciting new questions, leaving the door open for the story to continue. Which is smart, because with so many characters, the show can't afford to give all of them the same amount of time in the spotlight. Some characters are quite distinct and interesting, others feel quite undercooked, and then we don't dive to the same levels of depth as we do with others like Alonka and Anya and even Natsuki. Those are the more distinct characters in this show, and each character can trigger because they're all interesting and compelling explorations of past trauma that just develop these characters beautifully, as they're like in this ticking time bomb, proverbially speaking. They are all walking towards death with each passing minute, and that gives the show an enormous amount of tension and makes the relationships interesting, filled with friction, as these characters are all so young. They naturally don't really know how to deal with all of this. And while I think each episode and each story told by these characters has something interesting to it, my favorite episode is by far episode 8. Not getting into details, it's a Natsuki focused episode, and it was immensely triggering to me. So I just want to say that in case you find it triggering, just be aware. But it's a beautifully told story that had me tearing up, had me shaking watching it, and it's easily one of those episodes I see myself constantly going back to. It's another quality of the show. You can go back to these episodes and just watch these stories within the story individually, and it's one of the best works Mike Flanagan has done writing-wise. The praise for the immaculate direction goes to Viet Nguyen, and I hope I'm pronouncing the name right, because this is one spectacular episode that is heartbreaking. And that is an emotional investment not all of these episodes can accomplish, because some of them are quite creative from a storytelling level, but they just don't pull on emotions to that level. And that's one of my biggest issues with this show. This, despite good, because the writing is solid, the characterizations are compelling, it just feels like the lesser Mike Flanagan show, and I bet it's because his directing is not constantly there. It feels like both within the show and behind the scenes, we're listening to several different stories from several different voices by way of Mike Flanagan. It is such a huge change of pace for the usual short stories that he does, where the story gets told within one season, 7, 8, 10 episodes, where this is long-form storytelling, where he can extract all the emotion and the potential of the story within this short amount of time. A big reason for that is the entire subplot of the series that did not land for me whatsoever. It's a mystery that offers absolutely no gratification and feels rather underwhelming. It involves Alonka searching for a former member of the Midnight Club that she believes has survived her supposedly terminally ill disease, and she wants to find out if it's due to any supernatural entity. Can one escape death, or was she just lucky? And it tackles into some interesting themes about acceptance and mortality, which is what this show does so well when it comes to its main plotline, but everything surrounding this character just led to absolutely nowhere interesting for me, and each moment that we dedicated to that storyline fully took away from what could have been dedicated to fleshing more of these stories and other members of the Midnight Club out. And naturally, not all of them land in the same way, so the show constantly feels like it's searching for this perfect balance and never quite reaches it. This could be because Mike Flanagan, in this pursuit of creativity, where all the characters are bringing these different stories and genres into the fold, he adapted a ton of Christopher Pike's mythology and other works instead of just entirely focusing on the Midnight Club from what I read. So that could have cost the show in a sense, but it's still interesting enough. Despite being the lesser of Mike Flanagan's work, this is still a very compelling story told in very interesting ways that opens a ton of potential for where this series could go. So I think it's somewhat of a slump when it comes to Mike Flanagan as a creator, as a storyteller, but as a show, this is really fun to watch, and it's a different type of horror that I really welcome, particularly when you take into account the layers of the story as it unmasks all these characters who are constantly facing their mortality. But before you run out of time in this review and I let you know my final thoughts on the Midnight Club, I need you to start the conversation about it in the comments below. What is your favorite Mike Flanagan show or movie if you want, and have you read the original books? Anything and everything down there. And if you're enjoying this review, if you want more Netflix horror reviews, or if you just love movies and TV, this is the place to be, so consider clicking that subscribe button and you won't miss any future conversations on your favorite movies and TV. The Midnight Club may lose a bit of Mike Flanagan's distinct voice along the way, but the storytelling creativity is still immense, with compelling tales on the horrors of mortality, trauma, and fate. It's a true testament to the power of storytelling and how it keeps all these characters at bay. So now that it's on Netflix, go sit down and join the club. I'm giving the Midnight Club a B. That is my story for the Midnight Club. It's now streaming on Netflix. Go check it out and let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching, and stay tuned for many more videos to come. Big thanks to my channel members for always supporting the channel. And until the next one, love each other and love the movies.